Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am excited and nervous about this because this podcast is long overdue. The idea for this podcast actually came in 2020 during the lockdown, when the world completely shut down. I started thinking maybe I could do a podcast, which is literally based on the same title of my book. For those of you who know me, you know that I am the author of the book titled Disrupt Yourself or Be Disrupted. So when the idea came, I was held back, by fear, by self-doubt, and also by lack of resources, So I kept telling myself or allowing these voices in my head to tell me I don't have what it takes, to pull this off. And I sort of listened to those voices and I just sat in my corner and said, there's no way I can do a podcast. Telling myself that this was not possible. I was afraid. But eventually I have taken that dreadful first step of starting my podcast. And honestly, I don't know how it's going to play out, but I've made up my mind to trust the process. The first step is usually the hardest, and I think so far I've crossed that part. If I'm sitting here, with the mic and the camera in front of me, and I believe that the most difficult has been overcome so far. And for those of you who know my story, you know that I don't come from a technological background, and I am not an academician by any stretch of imagination. The technology that I speak of, I really speak from more of an observer, looking at how technology is changing the world. And how did this come about? I've told the story so many times. In 2016, I was retrenched from a job I held to for dear life. And when the let-off happened, I was very much curious as to what is driving retrenchment, the rate in which it was at that time. I know that things have gotten worse now, but even back in 2016, there was a lot of companies, laying off people, and I was one of them. So as time went on in 2017, I really became very curious about the disruption that was happening at that time. And I literally Googled, why do companies, let go so many people, and how do they keep functioning if they retrench so many people? That question led me to what's called a rabbit hole, right? Where you just keep digging and digging and digging yourself in. That's literally how I went into that hole. And for the first time, I came across concepts like softwares that are replacing people at work, machines that are replacing people at work, jobs that used to be done by humans that are now being done by machines. And I was like, wow, okay, I guess this is what is happening at the back end when companies let go so many people. And I became really fascinated by these findings. Prior to that time, the only technology that I was really exposed to was to maybe sit on my laptop, send emails, use my phone, make phone calls. That was all I knew about technology. But now I was sitting here and learning about this automation, robotics, artificial intelligence. I became very fascinated about the whole technological advancement and disruption it was bringing into the world. So I started writing about it. And it evolved from those social media posts to articles, and it grew from those articles. And one day I thought to myself, maybe someone should write a book about this. Initially, I didn't think that someone would be me, but eventually I wrote the book and I titled Disrupt Yourself or Be Disrupted, because in my mind, I wanted to tell my story and let people know I was here minding my business and someone disrupted me. So you as well, you need to disrupt yourself, otherwise you get disrupted, because there is no neutral ground, right? I was forced into this world when I had to understand what technology entails, how it is changing the world of work, how it's changing my life. So my message is people should also disrupt themselves. Don't wait for someone to disrupt you, because when someone disrupts you, you're going to have to go through the pain that I went through. Right. And so when people hear of the word disruption, they immediately think of, oh, this must be business. This must be a new technological advancement coming into the marketplace. They don't really think disruption in terms of people or in terms of themselves. So my approach to disruption is really about people. People need to disrupt themselves. People need to disrupt the traditional mindsets they have been holding on to and move towards a digital mindset. People need to ask themselves hard questions. Maybe you are a student. Ask yourself, by the time you finish whatever degree you are pursuing, would it still be relevant for the marketplace? Maybe you are an employee. Ask yourself, what technologies are changing your industry and how can you upskill to stay relevant? These are the conversations that I wanted to drive through my book. And I feel that now is the time to drive these conversations, even through a podcast, and reach a new audience. And we carry these conversations forward because the technological disruption that is happening now, it's even more disruptive than it was happening back then when I wrote the book 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I think. So it is important that we have these conversations, and that's one of the reasons for this podcast. The reason it's important for you to pay attention to technology is because if technological advancements and new business models are disrupting the marketplace and people are left on their own, then there will be a massive gap between the new world of business and the people that work in it. You don't want to be in a world that you are not in alignment with, or in a business situation that you are not in alignment with. That is why it's important for you to understand how technology is disrupting the world and how you can align yourself with that disruption. In a world where technological disruption is the norm, it's easy to feel like you're being left behind. The rapid pace of change can be really overwhelming. And it's easy to feel like you're drowning in a sea of industry jargons and buzzwords and things you don't even understand. But what if I told you that you don't have to be a tech wizard to stay relevant in the digital era? What if I told you that you have the power to disrupt yourself and ignite your own potential? And that's where Disrupt Yourself or Be Disrupted podcast comes in. A podcast that empowers everyday people to embrace technological disruption and upskill themselves. And so this podcast is not really about business per se, but it's about self-disruption. It's about empowering everyday people who are not usually, tech savvy to pay attention to technological disruption and begin to upskill themselves or do something that helps them enhance their digital knowledge. There is an urgency to move from traditional mindset to a digital mindset. And so the podcast encourages people to be brave enough to look into the future, ask hard questions about your future, and take ownership of upskilling yourself. But this podcast emphasizes that disruption is a personal idea that requires you to take, action right now. Otherwise, you will be left behind. By embracing the mindset of self-disruption, listeners will be equipped to navigate the ever-changing digital landscape and stay ahead of the curve. This is more than just a podcast about technological advancement or new business models. This is a podcast about people. It is about everyday heroes who are stepping up to the challenge of disruption and are taking control of their own futures, to embrace disruption as a tool for personal growth and progress, and to use technology to enhance their lives and create a better world for themselves and others. It is about, that single mom who is learning how to code or who is starting an online business so that she can provide a better life for her family. It is about that person who has retired, but they are starting a new career in the tech world because they have decided they will not be left behind. The rapid advancement of artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and even intimidated by the rate of change, right? But the truth is that these technologies are created by human beings just like you and I, and they are ultimately meant to serve humanity. So the podcast seeks to explore the intersection between technology and humanity and how you can use technology to advance your life and create a better future for yourself and even for your community. The reality is the skills and knowledge that got you to where you are today may not be enough to carry you to where you want to go into the future. So you have to be willing to disrupt yourself, to push beyond your comfort zone and to constantly learn and adapt to new technologies and new ways of working, new ways of doing business, new ways of thinking. So in this podcast, we're going to be exploring the latest trends in tech and how they are impacting the world around us. We'll talk to everyday people as well as disruptors and thought leaders who are disrupting the status quo and making an impact in their different fields and industries. And if you've watched or listened this far, thank you. I wanted to share this to give, the context of the podcast and to prepare you for the coming episodes that we'll be releasing. And so if you've been inspired by this, remember to hit subscribe and give us a like as well.